673 for solve. Dang, okay, EP skip. $579. $632. Really good average. $581. That's a sub 6 average. So you just watched my $5.99 average from Cubing at Home 2.5. I'll link an unedited version to the average in the description if you're interested. So I used the Angstrom MGC Square-1 in this video, and honestly the cube is just amazing because I got the cube 2 days before the competition, and going into the competition it was still kind of like a brand new cube to me, and despite that I still ended up performing really well under the pressure. And so yeah, I'll be doing a review, stay on the lookout for that. And in this video, I'll be breaking down the solves. I'll be talking about sort of what went well, what didn't go so well, and hopefully you'll be able to learn a bit more about my solving. And so without further ado, let's just get started. So here is the first scramble. I will be putting all the scrambles up here on the screen. And so here we have fist scallop, and in this specific case, I traced odd. And so the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to move the fist over kind of like this, and slice, and now we can just solve scallop kite normally, just like this. I think a very slightly better solution I could have done for the cube shape was essentially, this is fine, but once I get to scallop kite, instead of having to move the layer by a -4, I could just move it by a 2, and I think that just saves a tiny bit of effort and just makes the solution just a bit easier. And also my solution was a little bit locky in the actual solve, and so I might have been able to save that with this solution. So moving on with the cube shape solution I actually did, which was like this. Next I had this 2-slice CO, which goes kind of like this. And then I just have this really easy EO, and so nothing went wrong up until around here. And so here I had a pretty big pause before the PBL, which obviously I'm going to have to pause a little bit because I do have to recognize the case, but I would like to pause just for a little less time in the future. And so this is just a 2CP PBL case. Essentially, once I do a U prime and leave this layer misaligned, I can do a JJ, and then that will leave me with another JJ, just like this. And so before I do the alg, I noticed this kind of big block right here. And I also know that the bar is flipped. And so for the alg that I use, where I do JJ and flip the bar at the same time, I know that this entire block gets preserved. And so that means that in this case, after I do the alg, I will have to do no AUF and no ADF. So I can just do the alg, and I'll immediately know that it's solved. I don't have to pause or anything. And so, yeah. So this solve was a 673. I believe it was 20 slices and 2.97 SPS. And so the SPS was under 3, which is suboptimal, I think. I don't know exactly what my average is, but it ended up being the worst solve in the average, so I guess it doesn't matter too much. And so yeah. Alright, so here is the second scramble. And so this is Muffin, which can either be a really good case or a pretty bad case, I think. And so in this case, unfortunately, I traced odd, which means I have to do this worse algorithm. And so the way this alg works is I'm going to solve, I'm going to turn this into barrel. And instead of just solving barrel directly, I'm going to have to turn it into scallop, move these layers over, switch the parity like this, and then solve scallop back. Next, I just have this really easy 1-slice CO into a really nice EO. And from this point, I realized that like the majority of the pieces are solved, and so I'm probably gonna have some kind of maybe a U-perm or maybe even a solved layer here. I wasn't 100% sure, but I just knew that this case could potentially be good. And so I just did my EO, and then I realized I simply just have a J on top with a bar flip into an EP skip. And so, yeah, I didn't execute this very well. It was a bit locky, and I just overall not really happy with the solve. It ended up being, I think, 18 slices and 3.08 SPS, and the time was 584. So in terms of SPS, it was a little bit better than last solve, but it didn't really feel better. It kind of felt like a really bad solve, but whatever, it's a sub 6, so I'll take it. So here was a scramble for my third solve. The time was a 579, and for CSP, I traced odd, and that's actually a really good thing for the scramble, because if I were to trace even, I would kind of have to move this pair over to the front, and then slice, and then solve shield. But the scramble was like this, and for the odd alg, I don't have to do any moves. I can just slice immediately and then go right into shield, which I think was pretty nice. And I think that it was executed decently. Next, I just have this 2-slice CO. I think I could have just done a U and then kind of solve it like this, and then go into EO. But instead, I kind of did like a D prime and then solved with D moves, which I think is slightly slower, but it's fine. Next, I just have 1-1 for EO. And then for Pierre, I'm going to do a D2 quickly. And then I realized that if I preserve these blocks like this, by misaligning the layer, I will have an opposite on bottom. And here, I have a choice between getting a W on top or an O on top. And I 100% would prefer getting O op as opposed to W op. The Alfred is just much better. And I know I can force O op by misaligning the layer, because this will preserve these sort of adjacent pieces, as opposed to preserving these opposite pieces. And so if I misalign both layers, I can do JJ, and then I can go right into the O-op alg. So overall, this solve, the time was a 579. I think it was 22 slices and 3.8 SPS. And so the solve had the highest slice count of all the solves in this average, and even despite that, it was the fastest time. And that can be attributed to the fact that I had the highest slices per second in this solve, and so yeah, pretty cool. So here's a scramble to my fourth solve, which was a 632, and so there were a lot of things I could have improved in this solve, I think, and so I'll be putting all of that after showing you what I did, and so yeah, I'm just gonna go over what I did, and then I'll go over everything between cube shape and the end of the solve as to what I could have done better. So it's just shield square, and I traced even, which is the good alg, so I just simply solve fist like this. Next, I have this 1-slice CO, which for some reason I misaligned the bottom for. Then I have this 4-slice EO, and then this CC case where what I did was just JJ into 2 W perms, WW, and so I just did the alg, which essentially is just doing adjudge, canceling into HH, and the alg goes like this. Just like that. So, upon cube shape, there are already 2 things that I could have done better, I think. And so, the first thing is that my cube shape solution itself was just bad. Because, essentially, I did a 6 on top, kind of a U2, and then I solved shield square. But I could have completely avoided that 6 on top by just solving shield square from a different angle. And what I could have done was just simply misalign this later by 1, and then just solve shield square kind of in the front, I guess? Or I don't know if this is considered back or front, but just from this angle. So the second thing I could have done better was was to predict CO, because you can probably see from my solve that right after cube shape and right before CO I had a pretty big pause, and that could have been completely mitigated. So I have absolutely no idea how to explain this CO prediction thing. I know #Cuba has a video explaining it, and so I'll link that in the description. But I just know that after I do my cube shape, my corners will be affected by sort of a U R2. And so what I mean by that is I can imagine kind of doing a U, and then doing an R2, or I guess a slice move, will kind of join this black piece with this black corner, and then this black bar will kind of go down here. And so my CO, ignoring the edges, my CO will just look like this. And so pretty much I can just do do the cube shape, and then I can go immediately into the CO. I don't have to look at the bottom or anything. I'll know exactly what the CO will be. Alright, so the next thing I ended up doing wrong was kind of how I solved CO. And the reason I say that is just because my solution was by misaligning the bottom layer like this, and then slicing. And then from here I just had EO into CC, and that was the way I solved that, was like doing JJ into WW, which hopefully you remember from earlier in this video. But if I had solved CO like a normal person by misaligning the top layer, then once I do EO, I get a much better PBL. It's just K and then PJ. And then I think from this angle, the best thing to do is just to D prime and then JJ into adj. So in terms of statistics, this solve was, the time was a 632. I think it was 19 slices, which would make it about 3.00 SPS. That's not exactly 3 SPS, but it's right around there. Alright, so here is the final solve of the average. It was a 581. So here's my cube shape. I have this kind of 4-2, and then like a line on the bottom, I think it's called. And so I traced even for this case, which is unfortunately the bad algorithm. So instead of just solving scallop kite, or I guess in this case kite scallop directly, I have to do like a few moves before I do that. So here what I do is just slice D, or just move this pair over rather, and then slice, and then I just do scallop kite. And so that adds 2 slices. From here, I ended up solving scallop kite kind of in the front, like that. But I think it would have been slightly better to solve scallop kite into the back, because instead of doing a -4, I could have just done a 2. I think I had that same case earlier. I think it was in the first solve. But yeah, I ended up doing it in the front. And I don't know how I messed that up, but there we go. Next, I just have this simple 3-slice CO into M2 for EO, which is really easy. And then finally, I just have this case for PBL. And yeah, this is just an easy case. The way you do it is probably just doing JN into op. So yeah, pretty simple solve. I think it was a little bit locky during PBL, but it's still sub 6 and 0.02 away from being the best solve. So I think if this was the best solve, it really wouldn't have affected my average at all. It might have been like 598, but that's just 0.01, so it doesn't make any difference. So yeah, the solve was 19 slices. I think it was 3.27 SPS, which is, I think it's decent. So as for some statistics about the overall average, the average slices per second, or the average SPS throughout the entire average, was 3.23, which I think, I'm not exactly sure what average is, but I think that's probably about average, maybe slightly better than average, I have no clue. And the average slice count for all the solves was 19.6. And I think my average slice count usually is about 21, something like that, 20, 21 maybe. And so yeah, these scrambles were definitely a little bit lucky because the move counts were a little bit less. But I still think I ended up turning pretty well in these solves, and I ended up executing these solves really well despite the luck I had. So yeah, overall I'm really happy with this average, and I guess I don't really have much else to say, so thanks for watching.